let's go ahead and go through these, starting with one of the games I think that I absolutely loved, but was limited by technical problems. So, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the remake, and then last year's The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Both of these were made using the same core technology, but both of them exhibit one major fault on the Switch. Having covered these originally, I think it was very clear. Essentially, they try to run at 60 frames per second, and they often fail, especially when transitioning between areas. And it seems to be somewhat double buffered, meaning that every time the frame rate drops, it goes from 60 down to 30. And you're kind of bouncing between these two, making for a very rough experience. I think anyone that's played it can attest to this. So, of course, I was excited to see how they would perform on Switch. Oliver, what's the verdict?
Yeah. So these two games were really excellent titles that looked good, I would say, on original Switch hardware.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just that poor
Great.
performance. So you had that
Yes.
really inconsistent profile with that double buffer VSync setup that you mentioned. You get these pretty wild swings basically anytime they were over budget from 16.67 milliseconds. They go immediately to 33.33 and they kind of stick there for a long time.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was, you basically get the sensation of going from 60 to 30 to 60 to 30 and back again. And I would say this is a bad issue in Link's Awakening, but it's not like, it's something that you could overcome and stomach through.
Yeah.
But for me, at least in Echoes of Wisdom, it was really intense. You spend a lot of that game at
Agreed.
30 FPS. So yeah, you covered these games initially, John. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts, but this is like, these are some games, two games on original Switch hardware, one of very few titles on original Switch hardware that I set aside and I said I'm going to wait for an upgraded console because I don't want to play these games in their current state.
Yeah, I actually did that with Echoes of Wisdom. I love Link's Awakening so much that I did play through the whole thing originally, and there was no hope of a new Switch anytime soon when those originally released, right? Or when Link's Awakening came out. So I was just like, this is what it is. This was one of the games I played back on Game Boy. One of the games I had back on the Game Boy back in the '90s when it came out, of course. So seeing it remade in this way, I loved it. But yeah, the performance wasn't great in spots in the overworld, but I felt like dungeons in some areas of the overworld were largely okay. And that's why Echoes of Wisdom was kind of a bummer, because pretty much the entire open world area runs like garbage. And by that I mean it's mostly 30 FPS with random jumps to 60, making it feel wildly inconsistent in a way that I found extremely off-putting during actual gameplay, and it got worse the further you played. So
Mm-hmm.
I also just had to put it down and hope for the best. And my hope was like it would just run better on the Switch too. I didn't actually think they would go back and do what they've done here because uh the first thing, obviously, yes, spoilers, it does fix the frame rate. The frame rate is now perfect. It's 60 FPS locked. It's 100% exactly what I originally wanted. Just even coming out of those various buildings, it never drops. The swamp area in Link's Awakening, it's perfect now. Everything I saw in the game so far is exactly what I wanted, and that alone was exciting. But there's actually a lot more to it than just the performance, right?
That's correct. They do hit a locked 60 FPS, which is quite impressive. On top of that improvement, they both look much more refined. So I would say that in both games docked, in interiors, they looked okay. They were kind of near 1080p, I would say, in terms of resolution.
Sure.
But in the outdoor environments, you're getting something closer to 720p, and they looked pretty rough in both titles. And now we're going from about 720p in those open world environments to something about 1620p, I counted, something in that
Yep.
range, which is about 4 times the raw pixel count, which greatly improves the overall fidelity of these games. And I think the artwork scales really beautifully to those high resolutions
Really
as
well.
well. Yeah, it feels like the games were designed under, to hold up under the scrutiny of high-res rendering. And here you're just seeing all that additional detail brought out. There are some minor changes as well, which people might like or dislike or whatever, but they are changes that I noticed here. The depth of field is a little bit deeper and less pronounced. So that means you get less background blur, less that tilt shift effect, which is presumably an artifact of that resolution change. So you see the environment around you a bit more clearly. Again, you could see that as a good thing. You could see that as a bad thing. That's just a slight artistic change that comes about as a result of the resolution difference. There's still some pretty obvious aliasing in areas of the image that are blurred from that depth of field. And the SSAO flickers quite a bit in motion. It would be really nice here if we had like some TAA or DLSS to clean that up, but maybe I'm asking too much here. The SSAO also looks a little bit different, a little bit more defined. It has a little bit of a different kind of outline to things. Looks a little bit different, but not necessarily worse. And then in handheld mode, I wanted to go over that quickly. We're going from typical resolutions around 576p in the original version to a full 1080p in all the shots that I counted, all that I tested. So flat 1080p looks really good in the Switch 2's panel. Again, that's about 4 times the pixel count. It's pretty impressive. Like docked mode, it does seem to come in at pretty much a locked 60 FPS as well. So overall with these games, these are 2 games that really were not in great shape on the original Switch hardware, I have to say. On Switch 2, they're comprehensively improved, and I have no caveats about recommending these titles to anyone. Handheld, docked, whatever. As long as you have a Switch 2, they're fantastic experiences.
Yeah, it's borderline like a free remaster is what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely.
It genuinely feels like something that they could have released for a price, and I'm glad they didn't though. So that's really great.